Hey, welcome everybody to the show. On today's show, we're going to be talking about n8n. It's the open source automation tool that's quietly transforming how developers and businesses streamline their workflows. So, why are so many teams ditching traditional platforms in favor of this self-hosted open source flexibility? And, how is n8n going to help change your approach to automation? Should you even change over to it? Should you stick with things like Make or Zapier? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Today is February 28th, last day of February 2025, and this is the Daily AI Show. And with me today to talk about it and show some demos along the way is Junmi, Beth, Andy, Carl, and I'm Brian. So I'd like to open this up, and maybe Carl will start with you because I know you've been working with n8n a little bit. And by the way, n8n, for anybody listening to this, is literally the letter N, the number 8, and then the letter N after that. And I learned from Perplexity that is, I'm just going to pull it up here really quick. It was founded in Berlin and launched as an open source project in 2019. n8n stands for node-based workflow automation. And I definitely did not know that. I was curious myself where that name came from. I'm not sure where the 8 works in there. More automation. I don't know. Could be a translation from German as well, I'm imagining, but node-based workflow automation is what it stands for. So anyway, back to you, Carl. You played around with it. I played around with it. I built a couple of workflows. I followed other people's templates, but ultimately, I guess maybe where did you hear first about n8n and what intrigued you to maybe go take a look at it versus some of the other workflow automation tools such as Make and Zapier?
I want to begin. There's two things I want to start with. The first one is it's interesting that, just like you, I pronounce it N8N, but there's a couple people. So, for example, when Respell got bought by Salesforce, a lot of the automations there went to Lindy, and the Lindy folks called it Nathan. And I was like, "What's Nathan?" And they're like, "No." I was like, "Oh, that's how you pronounce it?" Because I didn't know. And they're like, "Yeah, that's how we all pronounce it." And like, "Who's you?" And it's like, "Oh, people, Lindy." And like, okay, but it didn't really dawn on me that you could pronounce it that way. Cause just that was a stupid sidebar. Um,
No, I think it's important actually because
it's
is it not Zapier, but is it Zapier like happier? Isn't what you always say, Beth?
yeah,
All right.
I
So
don't
like
know.
I'm with you. Like, how am I supposed to pronounce it?
But Zapier is like, I mean, n8n and Nathan are like, much further apart. Like, I think we need to know.
A whole company calls it that way, then there's something interesting that people thought it was. Anyway, the second
Before you go on, Carl, just explain what Lindy is in the context of Salesforce.
so Lindy is very similar to products like Zapier, like Make, like Relevance, like Respell. And there's a whole bunch of them that does business automations and they have AI built into it. Just that's how I would describe Lindy. Um, but actually I want to go back further because I was listening to the big technology podcast with the chief research scientist from OpenAI. I think Mike or John Chen. Can't remember, but he said today that really interesting, and I think this captures what we're talking about today too. He said, whenever we release new frontier models or any models, there's always a discovery process for new and interesting use cases, which reminds me of March 2023, where Sam Altman said, instead of us trying to figure out what the use cases should be, you are going to figure out what the use cases should be. So I think sometimes we forget that all these labs are just releasing things and it's really up to us to figure out what we are going to be using it for. There are some people who have used it for different pieces. So unless you do it for math, science, STEM, and coding, there are so many different use cases that we probably don't even realize, right? Even you, Brian, like when you were talking about your router, um, part of your custom GPT now process, that's you figuring that out, right? There isn't someone's going to tell you, oh, there is this thing that you should do with custom GPTs. That's how you do it. And this is how you wish. No, there's nobody who does that. And I think that's important for everyone to remember that all these models, all these tools, unless there's really predefined, it's really up to us. And that's part of the excitement, right, of doing that. Now, taking that to n8n is, I think it's very, very similar to Zapier and Make in terms of automations. What from an AI perspective, though, I think which is a little bit different is the ability of the AI agent. And we'll show you that in a second. But you could, outside of how many integrations does Zapier have, how many integrations does Make have in terms of APIs and connectors?
It's like Zapier is like 4,000, Make is 1,000.
Yeah, something like
n8n is 400.
400, yes.
Yeah.
Now, I like that they do the major ones like, Google Drive, Outlook, OneDrive, like the big pieces. I'm sure they're adding pieces all the time based on your
all the
OS.
time.
Yeah. So, and who of us uses all 4,000, 1,000 automate? Like there's very unique use cases for that. So I guess I'm gonna share the screen here. And
While you're doing that, I'm gonna add just a little extra on the naming. I did not mean to click. I already had a pre-selector in Perplexity. I didn't mean to hit deep research on how do you pronounce the name. That seemed like an overreach of what deep research is. However, it was very thorough, and this is what it came back. So real quick, while the screen is coming up, because it says official. Okay. The name n8n has 2 official pronunciations. One of them is not Nathan, by the way, but is recognized by the company itself. According to n8n's official press materials, the name can be pronounced either as n8n or notamation. The dual pronunciation consistently mentioned across various sources of success with school. The first and more commonly referred pronunciation is n8n with the number 8 in it. The pronunciation treats the numeral 8 in the middle as a word for the number 8, right? The second accepted pronunciation is notamation, which reveals the actual meaning behind the name. This pronunciation acknowledges that n8n is actually a numeron, which is a word where, say that 10 times, a word where a number is used to replace several letters. In this case, 8 represents the 8 letters between the first and last N in the word notamation. And then it goes on to talk about how the founder, Jean Oberhaus, according to him, while searching for a name for the project, he found that many desirable names are already taken. He initially settled on notamation, which reflected the node-based nature of the automation tool, but ultimately shortened it to n8n. So I think we can all agree it's n8n. I don't know where Nathan comes from, other than the other folks at Lindy, but that doesn't appear in this deep research of how do you pronounce a name. I've never done deep research so far on name pronunciation, but maybe we should do it more often. Anyway, back to you, Carl, but I wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, notamation is what it was. Nodemation is how you would spell that, because I know people are asking. It's not animation, nodemation.
Okay.
So yeah, here we go. No,
Okay.
just to be clear for the hosts, when you share, it goes in the green room, and then I bring it up. So I was waiting for Brian to finish.
Okay. Okay, so one thing that the biggest thing for me, I guess let's introduce n8n. Very similar to Make and Zapier and so on, right? There's the pricing wise, very similar. What I really like too, if you want to get right into it, there's templates that you can automatically apply, similar to the other ones, right? So if you go to templates, and then there's a lot of different use cases, right? And then let's take HR. And then if you open this, you can just use the workflow for free, right? And then they'll show you how this workflow operates. And I kind of like that piece. The biggest piece for me, which really changes everything, is the ability to self-host. Because so many of our clients were like, oh, yes, we'd love the automation, but I don't like how it's going. It's hosted on Zapier or Make or Lisa or wherever, right? Even though whether they have SOC 2 compliance, whatever the compliance is, they're like, don't like our data going there, especially like as you start building out complex automations. What's awesome about this is that you can self-host it. So, for example, here, if you look up here, it's all hosted on my computer. And if you self-host, you don't have to pay their $20 a month or $40 or $50, whatever the pricing is. And for clients, this is amazing because then they can put it on their own servers and locally host it and do all the things without data going to n8n. So that, to me, that's the biggest piece that Make, Zapier, and some of these other companies, Cassidy, do not have. Right? They don't allow. I don't think they allow you to do this, which
I don't believe so. And the other big one too, Carl, is that it's open source,
yes,
right? So self-hosting and open source. Now there's other features that like multi-trigger and things like that that we can get into that are actually very cool and Make doesn't have. But yeah, those are the two big ones. I just want to make sure we hit the other one as well because it's that there's a huge community built behind this that is building not only workflows like Carl showed, they're actually also building nodes. Like you can go and some are like verified, right? Some are in more of a developmental beta type thing. But for instance, if you want a node that accomplishes and it's not one of the ones like, yeah, go ahead and click this. Yeah. So these are the ones that you can pick from, right? These are the different nodes and they do a lot of stuff, but type in perplexity really quick in there. Okay, as you can see, perplexity is not an option in
Uh,
there.
it can't. It is actually on there. Well, not as that.
It's not named perplexity is my point.
Yes,
You could do it through an HTTPS, and there's ways to do it through OAuth and other open routers on there. But so yes, you can use perplexity. My point though is like it's not currently one of the 400.
Yes,
That doesn't mean though that some user has not open source created that node and solved the problem for you, which
correct.
is amazing.
Yeah. So very similar to a lot of the other automations tools, right? So you can really just build trigger manually on app event. Very, I think a lot of ones is Google Drive. You put in a Google Drive, right, on involving changes on a specific folder. You have to put your credentials in. Um, I don't want to go too deep into, what the triggers are, but there's a little bit of understanding a little bit about JSON schema, just a little bit understanding. It's really worth it. If you really want to build with this, lots and lots of YouTube videos on how to do it. And it's actually very simple to get into. Like n8n themselves, their YouTube channel has lots of courses on it. Super simple. And again, no code, low code. So if you don't have any coding experience, it's really, really easy for you to get going. I think from an AI perspective, one thing, and feel free, whoever else jump in, and Brian, if you use this, is this little fun activity here, right? I don't believe any of the other tools has this capability. I think you can. So for example, let's say Google Drive trigger, and I want to go use OpenAI. Everybody kind of has that, kind of these three features. If you want to use OpenAI, right? Zapier has this too. Want to message a model, then you have an account, right? Message a model, choose whichever you want to choose from. Um, you can use have this GPT-4o, right? And then from there you can provide your instructions. So you have the system message. Sorry, you have a system message in here. No, I'm just actually, you've got the role and user system messages here. And then you can put the system message and so on. And the role. If you played with OpenAI's Playground, very similar how you would set this.
And it looks very similar to Make too. You have to put you can put in a system message. You don't have to put in a system message. You put in the user message. Yeah. So that part's not too far for what you're showing here, but I like where you're about to show because it's different. It's not in line like where you would expect, right? Like that. Yeah. It's not in line like that. No, normally.
We'll leave that
So,
there.
so just to clarify, when you said, Carl, the other tools don't have this, what we're looking at is Carl's screen. So if you're listening to this, you probably want to come and look at some of the visuals. But it's an AI agent. Is that a node? It's an AI agent thing.
They would call it a node, right?
Cool.
So I'm going to delete this, just open. So they have AI, and then they have a lot of other things that you can do, information extractor, LLM chain, Q&A chain, but most of the time this is the big one that is really amazing to use, right? And in the agent itself, you could have conversational agents, functions, execute agent, but ideally where you want to play with is the tools agent. And in the agent itself, you can give it instructions, right? So define, so you have the task. This says text, but you can put the task, and then you have a system message here as well. So you put the task in, write, create, whatever you want it to do, but then you have the system message, which is right here. And then you put in your essentially your system prompt that you want to use that agent. So very similar again to the OpenAI one. What differentiates this from the OpenAI and others is, okay, so I am going to use Open Router, and I'm going to use Perplexity in here because they do have Perplexity. I'm going to use, it doesn't matter, whatever we use there. So that would be the AI model. So for example, if I wanted to do search, it can do search. It has the Perplexity search on top of it. Now, the other piece is the memory piece. So if you're having a conversation with this thing, let's do, actually, I need a trigger. Let's just do on chat. Yeah. So what's also nice about n8n is the ability to chat. So you can chat. Stupid thing. Oh, okay, hide that. Okay, so you can chat with it. It's not really active yet. Obviously, I haven't done anything here, but you can chat with the actual model. So because it's connected now to Perplexity, I still haven't, put in any task it's supposed to do. Be a helpful assistant. I'm just going to do that and search stuff online. So that would be the Perplexity. Let's go through it a little bit more. The memory tool is whenever you're, let's say, chatting on ChatGPT, if you know how in a thread, it remembers the conversation in that thread. Now, if you don't put a memory there, it won't remember the actual conversations you're having. It's just going to be localized to that one question answer at a time. So, but n8n makes it super easy that you can use stored memory, which is really awesome. So this context window length is how many conversations it'll remember, or in the thread. So 5 is pretty small. Sometimes we put it to 10. And then I usually connect it to the chat node, but you can be very, very specific and get more complicated if you want, but let's just keep it there. And then the really, really interesting thing about this is the tool function. Now, this enables your AI agent to do stuff on top of just chatting with it. So like most automations, if you chat, AI agent, let's say output, but what the tool function allows you to do, so let's go to Gmail. It allows you now to message, you can label, you can draft, you can thread. So for example, if you want your AI agent to send an email on your behalf, you can ask it to send it. If you want it to send a draft, if you want it to delete a message, read a message, so many different messages. I'm going to show you something a little bit complicated, but I'm just going to save that. And this is an email agent that I got a template for from one of the creators. So as you can see here, this whole workflow would connect to that agent that we just built. And it can now reply, send, label, create, get labels, mark, unread. All of this are all the tools. So you can chat with your essentially email agent and it'll execute any of these things based on the conversations. Some people have built it so they just talk to it and say, hey, I want you to mark all my emails unread. Execute, it would execute this. I want you to send an email to Gary, and they connected it to their CRM using Airtable. Oh, now this is the most important part of this entire thing is how you prompt, because it actually is different than how you would prompt just a simple requesting an LLM model to accomplish a task. The prompt I've learned is a little bit different because you're actually enabling the AI agent to take action and think through what it should do. So it's like some of the prompts are really, really long. It's like, if you do this, send an email. If this has happened, send a text. If you want to do this, go search online. If you want to do this, do this. I'll give you an even more crazy example, and this is from another user. Is they use Telegram, and this is like an ultimate AI assistant. So they would use Telegram, give it some sort of instructions, and it would enable the assistant makes the decision whether to create content, contact, create a calendar, create an email, or just chat with you. They even put a calculator in there. And so they do everything in Telegram. The only problem I have though is I can't connect using a local host. And I don't know if you've solved this, Brian, is I can't connect Telegram to my locally hosted n8n because it needs an HTTPS, which then I need to go to ngrok to apply, which I haven't done yet. So that's the only piece. I think the easier model is to go. This would be probably easy on the cloud. I just can't use it on a local system. So I'll kind of stop there because that's kind of a lot. And I don't know if you want to jump in and any questions, or we can take it further.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're showing is like when you talk about having to be specific, and you can see it there, sort of, even on this example. But even if it had 10 other things other than Gmail, like you had just shown, um, what you're basically doing is through the AI agent, you're allowing ChatGPT, or let's say 4o, to decide what the best tool is to solve the problem you want, which is why you have to be pretty descriptive. In other words, if that tool is called a certain name, just like with good prompting techniques, even if it was in Telegram, you would have to almost learn the right cadence, lexicon, wording to get it to do what you wanted all the time. Probably fairly easy to do. We've all worked with the echoes in the house and stuff like that. And you've said the name or whatever, and she doesn't quite give you back the answer you want. But if you reword it, you get exactly the right answer back. It's sort of like that. Like, yes, it can be very powerful. And there's a lot of examples like you've shown, Carl, and I have some as well that where it's connected, it's sort of, they call it their Jarvis, right? It can do anything.
Yes.
It can, with time, there's latency built into that. It's not going to be immediate. It can, but I believe if you were really doing a full demo and using those tools, there's a bit of a learning curve in terms of how do you ask the right questions, which begs the question, is this something that you can just build and deploy to a client? Possibly, but you would really have to be aware of what that end user experience is going to be like, because you're not going to deploy something that looks like a really pretty chat, especially if it looks like something like if you're just doing advanced voice mode with AI and they just consistently get errors or wrong or bad or no messages response. That actually could be worse. You could be singing to the hills saying like, I built this amazing chatbot, it'll answer all your questions, and you're going to have a whole bunch of end users going, it doesn't answer my questions, it doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so there's ways to work around that. You could add in obviously more RAG system into it. You could keep going against that. But that is one potential concern of like when you see these YouTube videos, not to take anything away from them, but when you see the YouTube videos, it's like, I built this one chatbot, I now charge $5,000 for it. And I'm a millionaire. That's why I'm making this YouTube video. It's because I'm just rolling in the money. You have to look at that with a little bit of a critical eye to say, okay, hold on a second. you know, is it impressive what the automation is? Yes. Is it probably doing what they're saying it is? No, that's more the clickbait side of it, right? Um,
I want to add
So
that too, because I want to just piggyback on that. That's so important what you said, Brian, because you can't, for any business, we talked to so many businesses, work through so many process and workflows. You won't be able to build this until you know what the business processes and workflows are actually are. You can't just take a templated uh, ultimate assistant, does this, and just drop it into any business because there's so many nuances And unless you understand the nuances and the whole why they do this, just dropping that and charging them $5,000 or 4,000, whatever, makes no sense. And I'm so like, who are the businesses that say, yes, just do this for me? And
Right.
it runs with no problems without having full conversations on what the process is and why that process happens on a larger business scale.
Right.
Just, I was like, impossible. Like, who are these businesses that are doing this? Because when we talk to them, there's no way I can just deploy a random thing and just say, "Hey, okay, now pay me." I was like, impossible.
It's scaffolding, right? It's scaffolding, but it's not. So like, can it get you to like some sort of templatized starting point that most companies are going to need like, whatever. But to your point, Carl, I mean, it comes back to what we all know. It's like the n8n is not replacing people with AI, especially when it's deployed and stuff. It requires consultancies. It requires people who have a better understanding of the expertise inside those companies to understand what the true pain points are, and then build to those pain points to solve solutions. And sometimes I imagine you get pretty close with a deployable template, but there's almost always going to be nuance in there. There's almost always going to be like, we call it n8n, we don't call it n8n, right? Every company's a little different. And whether that's it or not, like there's going to be nuances within that company. And ultimately, this always comes down to the same thing. Build a Jarvis, do all you want. If the users hate it and don't understand how to use it, what good was it in the first place? You're not, like, why would the company be excited about that if it's a very, very powerful tool that nobody understands? You know?
So, question from Cisco. What's the credit situation like? Do they offer more credits than Zapier? Zapier, you jinxed me, Brian. Um, can you move really, can you be successful with a free account, or is that, and I assume a cloud hosted free account because you can with self-hosted?
Yeah, so these guys are really stringent on the cloud one. So free, they'll give you like a couple days. I don't know, Brian. All I know is when I did a free account, they closed my account within like 5 days. They're like, build this. Okay, now we're gonna close your account.
You
So
get 7 or 14 days, but I would imagine if you pushed hard on the how many times you're running it through, there's a cost associated to them, and they're calculating how much you will or won't use your free account. If you try to build and deploy, I would imagine they're gonna lose money on you. There's no way. They're really no, you're not setting up a new account every 3 days. So I could see why they might be shutting you down. I have costs up on the screen, Beth, if you want to pull it up really quick, because let's just look at a quick cost comparison between n8n and Make, because it is different. So it's a good question, Cisco. They don't with Make, what happens is they charge you, let's say, per node inside a workflow. So if you have 10 or 15 steps in a Make automation, and you run that 100 times, I hope you figured out what your billing structure was going to be for the people who are running it 100 times, because you're paying for that. With n8n, they charge you per workflow, which is much different. It could be super complex. They're only charging you per the workflow. So you can see here, cloud packages starting at 20 euros per month for 2,500 workflow executions. Unlike Make, n8n does not charge you extra for running more advanced workflows, which I just talked about. n8n doesn't have premium apps. All integrations are at your free disposal. Now, people might have created templates that they're charging for because they created an awesome template, as they should, so there's that. So Make is a little bit more complicated because they have free and core and enterprise plans and stuff. And n8n is a little bit more straightforward with what they're doing. It definitely has a more feel of an open source type solution where there's not multi tiers of it. It's like, no, come in here, build, no little JSON, no little schema, know how to move and operate if you know a little code. Although, let's be honest, you can go use any code helper that now exists from Claude to others to go build that code for you. It's not like you could quite literally screenshot. I've watched people do this of a problem where you're like, I don't know what code goes in this part of the n8n workflow, and Claude will answer it for you. I mean, or if not Claude, one of the other ones will that has any sort
well,
of
one thing I highly recommend if you want to use this, try to put it on your system because then you don't have to pay the 20. That I highly recommend. It's not actually that hard to deploy this on. Even if you have absolutely no experience using your terminal, they make it pretty easy to deploy it. And then you can use any large language model to help you out, but it's pretty straightforward to deploy it. And I would highly recommend the Docker route.
Yep.
You'll find that because it'll make it easier to update, because it'll always tell you, hey, we need to update, we need to update, we need to update. It's a little bit of a challenge running it because, like, for example, right before this call, my computer updated and I didn't know that Docker turned off. So I had to return on Docker and I have to execute n8n through my terminal. But other than that, you don't have to pay the $20 a month. And one more thing I wanted to say, Joe, we've all seen the stupid Make automation people, and they're the most complex automations I've seen, like all
Yeah.
these branches and nodes. And I was like, how much is it costing you to run that over and over again? Because that's not cheap to
Not a
run.
Make. No.
No. So if you're deploying that to a client, do they understand how much you're actually charging them, or like the cost of that? Because I was like, that's insane. Or is it just more of a personal thing? Because I'm always looking at it as like, are you really deploying that for a business or just you and just you showing it off?
And here's a good example of that. Let's focus in. Oh, well, let me back up here. What I'm showing on my screen now is a n8n automation that scrapes emails from Google Maps searches. This is something that a lot of people ask for. They're like, I want to go search for something on Google Maps and I want to get emails, I want to get websites, I want to get contacts, phone numbers, whatever, right? For, let's say, cold outreach, whatever their reasons are. So don't think of this, what you're looking at the screen, as like a roller coaster. Think of it as like a Hot Wheels track. In other words, here's where we're going to start a Hot Wheels. And if we zoom in here, it says when clicking the test workflow, which is this button right down here in the middle of the thing, which is great. I wish Make made it this easy to start a workflow. It's the simplest thing. Create a little node that says, when I click this button, go. Makes it more complicated than it needs to. There's an HTTP request here. We can just kind of click into these really quick. There we go. So we're making a request. There's a JSON query in there of what the request is. And in this particular case, I've used a town that is a couple towns over, Wesley Chapel, Florida, Mexican restaurant, right? Now that, if you look here, this is a Google Map search, right? It's literally this, okay? So that's the first thing we need. That's pulling it in as a JSON query. Now, I only used one of them. If we were running this workflow, then what that's ultimately saying is, hey, I could have given it 20 different queries. I could have said, give me Mexican restaurant, Vietnamese, American, China, whatever. I could have had 20 of those queries. It's going to pull it in with JSON with just a query code in it, so that it's pulling in the new one and running it concurrently through it. So if we look back out through here, there's some code in here. What I really love are these filter nodes. And this set node is like the best, because what you can really do is take the information you get, and before you're spending money, in this was a case, there's no AI in this. There's let me back up. There's no gotta hold down the, sorry, I'm still learning that you have to hold down the space bar when you're moving around. So that's why I keep messing that up. But what this is doing is it's going through filter, it's removing duplicates here if you can't see that. And then this is like going through Hot Wheels tracks around and around and around and around and around, however many times we need to, for however many it pulled back. And then it spits it out and goes down the track. And now it goes through 16 more loops because we're doing something else over it. So you can actually see it here, looping over the URLs, right? 18 times over if I let it run. And then we're looping over the pages. In fact, if we just hit test workflow, we'll actually see this move through the processes. And then 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10. Let's see if I think it was 18 last time. There it is, 19 times. And then around the racetrack he goes. Now we're over through aggregate and all the way through. And if we come out the other side, we can test this, which is one of my other features that I really like of n8n, is this test step right here. Make has that, but I always find that it fails. And I love that I can see the schema, the table, or the JSON over here on the right. So if I want to pull in the schema and see what it's pulling in, it's pulling in the emails, the JSON emails query, that's right. We don't want it to match what this is ultimately doing, is extracting a whole bunch of emails that come through in the metadata that are useless to us, to only give us what we want. You can actually see here, it says it kept 3 and it discarded 13 that wouldn't be available to, or wouldn't be helpful to me if I was trying to scrape this information. So there's just one idea, right? This is like by the way, I didn't build this. I used this off a template, and then I made it work for me. I followed along with it. This was a template directly out of that page that Carl showed at the beginning. So this isn't like, oh my God, Brian knows how to. No, I'm looking at templates and I'm learning through doing, which is exactly how I would tell anybody else to do this. Go find a template, go play with it. Yes.
So we've got some people in the chat who, and you've got some people in co-host panel who are like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." Where are the templates from? Uh, Gareth really wants this workflow. Like, what are your resources for the templates?
I think I just went in and looked at sales templates inside of that page that Carl had shared. I'd have to get the URL for the page. It's the templates page for like all of. Let me see if I have it open somewhere. Yeah, it's right here. Share this tab instead. It's this 1300 workflow automation templates. And if I
Great.
just went on sales and I click on sales here, it's gonna focus down. And then if we scroll somewhere in here, I might have already passed. There you go. Scrape business emails from Google Maps without using any third-party APIs. Yep, this is a guy, Akram Kadi. And then, like Carl said, it's click to explore here. You can use workflow here. You know what? You can actually just literally, well, I didn't get all of them. You can literally copy this and paste it directly into. You can also download it as a JSON file, which is really nice because then you just upload the whole template as a JSON file. But I could literally just copy and paste this directly onto a new canvas, which is what this is called.
Nice.
And then it's gonna throw errors, right? Because it's not connected to. In this case, we don't have any issues with. It's not gonna throw errors from this particular one because it works by itself. So I went in and switched out like what I wanted to look up and things like that. But this is like a really easy use case of where you could have quite literally hundreds of different search criteria that you want to do on Google Maps and extract that data. It's going to do it with some levels of success, but this is one example of it. And then let me just show you another one. This is a different example that is using AI as part of it. It's using OpenAI. It's also using Perplexity. But if you notice, Perplexity is in this different type of node. It's in an HTTPS node, like we were saying earlier. There will be an OpenAI node, official node for Perplexity. I'm kind of shocked it doesn't exist already, but it's not a big deal to do this. So what are we doing in this case? We're pulling competitors. We're doing research in Perplexity. Set fields, this is the one I told you I really, really like because what it does is it can pull out information um, that we may or may not want. So it's just a really easy like filter. It's a filter, but it's different. And it's helping us set the right field. So we like this is gonna pull here. Look, this pulls in. Let's just go ahead and run it. This is gonna take a second because it's pulling from Asana on it. And where is this pulling from? It's pulling while we look at this. This is what it's pulling from. The name Asana and the company Asana.com. This is what we're ultimately going to get in the end right here. All of this, right? Now, this is on a custom prompt that I wrote for Perplexity. So I took this prompt, this template, and I expanded on it with better prompting that I like. And in fact, I would go even farther. But here's the thing, like here's everything we're getting from Perplexity. Citations, objects, choices. But all I really probably want is this choice. I might want the citations to pop through as well to the Google Doc. But in this particular case, we're just pulling choices. So which is great. We don't want to send everything from Perplexity through OpenAI. We're paying for all of that through API tokens, right? So this set field is just pulling in the content, which you can see right here. Choices, right there in the JSON. So it's literally pulling that in. And the cool thing is you can literally go here. So there's citations, choices, content. I would literally grab this and drop it. See, it's identical. So I don't even have to know how to write this or do the curly brackets or whatever. I literally look at the schema and I go, this is what I want to come through and only this. So if I wanted citations, I would literally click that out and you can see here. And then where were citations? Citations were right here. Boom. And now it would pass through both content and citations to the next level. We can execute that if we want. Now what we're doing is we're running through this through OpenAI. But you notice I did the research in Perplexity. So why do I need OpenAI? Because OpenAI is really, really good at taking messy data and making it really, really clean, which is what we want. So we're going to do that. We're going to actually use it as an AI to help us clean up our messy data. And then we're going to push through an output, which is cleaning as well, and then to Google Sheets. which you guys saw on this one, and this is your output. So you could quite literally on this Google sheet, you could have 50 businesses that you want to prospect to and write your own prompting for it, figure out what it is you want to know about those businesses and set it on this sheet and then come back to your workflow and literally just hit run workflow and it'll output that to your Google Sheet. Now you need to connect to your Google account through a key. You need to connect with Perplexity in this case. You need to connect through an API key with OpenAI for this to run, but that's all fairly easy to do. So Cisco had a question earlier about sending this to Notion. Cisco, all you would do in this particular case is you can see that we have the starting point of pulling it from a Google Sheet. Whatever your process is that you want to do, that you want to send back to Notion would look very similar to something like this. You would use an OpenAI or similar to clean up that data as well as other fields. This is great because like we would pay for all of this, right? So we're by setting a field, we're really cutting down on our costs at this level. And then instead of Google Sheets output, you would look, Notion looks like it already has a connector tool. So if we click on it, these are all your options, Cisco, for what you can do for Notion. Probably creating new pages, updating pages, all that so much, all that so that what you would do then is just replace where it's going to Google Sheets.
You don't need to place, right? You can output it in multiple different like Google
Yes.
Sheet, email. No,
Yeah.
I could add Notion wherever you want to. So there's that functionality, which I think like it's literally your imagination how you want to figure that out and put like execute that.
See, now it to Carl's point, now it would be sending it to Google Sheets and to Notion. So sometimes you want a summary in Slack, but you want the full thing in Notion, right? There's a whole lot of variables here that you would want to do, that you might want to do for something like this. So just two use cases of thinking about how this is. Yes, there's the Jarvis stuff. I think that's a lot of Flash, but let's get down to like brass tacks. Let's get down to actual business use cases. And oftentimes it's the simpler things, not the bigger, flashier ones. We saw this with Respell before they got absorbed and now they're part of Agentforce with Salesforce. But Respell, people we know would put together very impressive looking spaghetti. And you'd be like, oh my God, what does it do? You're like, it does everything. And you're like, but does it? And then it would break and it would do this or whatever. And so I would just get to something like Cisco has. I want to take information from a Google Sheet and I want to parse it through whatever the AI thing I wanted to do. And I wanted to put it in Notion. And I'd be like, stop there. Then start working through, well, what if I didn't want all of the information? What if I wanted it to look prettier? What if I want certain headings? What if I wanted to look a certain way in Notion that looks like other things? That's where you start getting into you add pieces and you spread it and you break it apart and you add a node in there and you set the field or you filter something out or you split it. Also something that n8 has that Make doesn't have. Make has split, but it doesn't have merge.
Yeah.
n8n has merge. So if you have two concurrent ways that you're running data, you can bring them back together and streamline them back into one workflow, which is really helpful if you think about it. It's like a simple thing again, but it's really helpful. So there you go. I mean, that's like my side of like using it. I'm still learning. I'm not an expert. I can tell you a little few things, but I truthfully, this is forcing me to have to get better at JSON schema, understanding it a little bit more, getting back into using the curly brackets and doing certain best use cases for it. But super powerful tool. I mean, it's
I
awesome.
have a question about self-hosting, not in the context of a single user and running it on your own computer, but can you describe how you would mount an instance of n8n in a corporate environment for a client where it's accessible to anybody who has access, or permissions to that client?
So we just did that, and there's two pieces of that. One is who has access to actually build in there and who has access to execute in there. Because the execution part, the trigger could be just drag and drop file into Google Drive. That is literally the action. And in fact, for most corporate settings, they don't want to be in any kind of environment. They just like, this is what it is. Or if I do this in Teams, what will happen? And that's where we usually set it up in Teams or OneDrive. The action actually starts there. And that's where the trigger happens. And they don't even see any of this. If the people want to see this, then we put it into, they'd have to host it on their servers. And then people would then have to go into your local host. It depends on how the corporation set it up. And then certain people would put it. But most of the time, the only people who have access to actually build in it would be us and IT, and that would usually be it. There's very little companies that I would run into that
Because
actually
I
want.
can see where a company might not want to have their sales data, for example, go out to the cloud, and instead they want to have a local instance. And so, could it be as simple as, okay, we're going to add a Mac Mini to our network that has the instance. We're going to run that as a server, and we're going to run the n8n on that server, and that's going to be the interface
Could
to the other integrations that you have to your enterprise system.
Yeah,
That's a pretty cool idea.
it's all depends on how the corporation wants to run it, but that's the beauty of this, is that low self-hosting where none of this information goes out to n8n or Zapier or Make or anything. It just stays here, and then easy to update and then redeploy. And then one thing though that's really neat, I don't know if you've seen this, you can do an error execution, where you can, once you built the workflow, right? Whatever Brian has put up, you can actually create error notifications. So let's say, for example, you've built 3 workflows, or yeah, 3 workflows. You can actually set a new workflow that tells you, let's say on Slack or on Teams, that certain workflows have an error in them. And I love that because it's super simple. It's like, oh, there's an error. You can go in there and fix it. And then there's also the ability to bypass errors, right? So it's like, oh, if this doesn't work with, let's say, LinkedIn, and keep going, keep
Does it
bypass that, keep go to X, go to Meta, whatever. So there's a localized, like, you can bypass that just one piece because maybe your whole workflow is, you've built it so complex that it now touches on multiple um SaaS tools that but you don't want the entire workflow to stop just because of one.
love
I
it?
mean, what you could do for that too, Carl, like, let's just think farther than that. It'll throw an error. Sure, you can throw the error to Slack. What could you also do? You could go use Perplexity or any other tool to research the error code with a better understanding of what the entire workflow's intended purpose is and tell it what all the nodes are. So you can imagine, right? Pretty easy. I have an error code. This is what the entire process looks like. I don't understand an error code. So before you send it to me to Slack and you throw the error code to me, also give me your best shot at how I'm going to fix this.
For sure.
So there was a question in the chat about does it log the error code? And what you're saying is you need to create, if you want it to log, that's a thing that you ask it to do because you're talking about the Slack.
Well, I should show you. I'll go back to sharing my screen here for a second. And what you can see here is you can see the executions. So I haven't had any errors on this because it's all been testing this piece out. And this is the test execution. This is a true execution. And you can actually go back. As you can see, here's the error. And it can show you what it looked like because of the error. And it'll show you the error. And then you're in executions, and then you can see what exactly happened here that it didn't screwed up on. And it keeps a lot of pretty much all the executions, and then you can filter it through there. So you can see what what happened in that specific execution that led to that error.
Okay. And so, like Carl, like you and Brian were saying, so you can see the error here, what it's doing. Brian, like you said, you can use Perplexity or whatnot to learn about the error and how to fix it, and then use operator or computer use to teach another automation or to fix those errors.
Probably, yeah, I'm sure.
You could start getting a little like crazy at doing that, right?
But I think if you told it what if you were like, look, it's all about what you explain. So if you take the time to explain your whole automation and what its intended purpose are, and then break down that in like a markdown method or outline and explain what each node's intended purpose is, Now, when it throws a code, it has a lot of context as to why that code may or may not be working. And then I would take that as a template. I would have a template of this is what my workflow does. It throws an error, it sends it through and it says, add that error to this context, then send that to a Perplexity, do research on why this error code might be happening, concatenate that, summarize it, get rid of the bullshit stuff that's in there, and then throw it back over to Slack in a summarized method. Because to Carl's point, I mean, I can go in there and I can go see all the nuts and bolts. But what if I just need a quick overview and I'm like, I don't know. My next question on an error code is why is it throwing the error code? So just take that off your plate and start with, I see where the first 3 potential problems for this error code are, because that's where you're going anyway, right? So if you can get AI to do that work for you, take that off your plate. Don't make that a manual process. Before we run out of time here, I do want to cover just a couple quick things that are more about notes. Hopefully you like this show. Thank you for all the comments on there on it. Here's what Carl and I would both say this. Anybody would say this. Like, if you're going to go back to this show and try to recreate off this show, I think you're going to be nuts. What I would do is go look at templates on that website we showed you and try to build off of those, because I'm not an expert. You know, Carl's farther along than I am and he's building with clients. That's how I learn. There's also just a ton of YouTube channels, and a lot of those YouTube channels also have like school, SKOOL, teachable type, Kajabi type places where you can go to communities and they have helper videos galore. All I would say is just be careful with don't get find somebody that you really like and how they teach and the way they're explaining it, and don't get, blinded by the Jarvises and stuff, because you may not learn as much about something that's truly applicable. Okay, that's today's show. Really quick, Jimmy and Beth, tell us what we have coming up for the Sci-Fi AI show today.
So today at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, if you go over to the Sci-Fi AI Show channel, we are going live. We're doing the part 2 of the quantum computing conversation from the sci-fi perspective, because, wow, there's a lot there too. And the link for the Sci-Fi channel is in the chat, but it is the YouTube link at the Sci-Fi AI Show, like our thing is at the Daily AI Show. So hope to see you there.
Awesome. I can't wait for that. Also coming up this weekend, tomorrow we'll have our last weekend for the first time I sent out a short episode that's AI generated on these conundrums that I've been doing. I have the next one ready to go and it will be going out tomorrow morning. So if you want a little nice bonus episode, I know Cisco was saying he loved it. Thanks Cisco for the feedback. It's on the next conundrum. This conundrum is all going to be about AI usage in warfare with automatic weapons and things like that. So if you want to hear a cool discussion, about a 12-minute discussion about that, check out the show that'll go live tomorrow morning. We have the newsletter going out on Sunday morning. You can still get on that. Pretty much you can subscribe almost right up to the minute of when it goes out. So if you haven't done that, if you've been, sort of shuffling your feet, I highly recommend you going and signing up for the newsletter. It's free. We're just adding more. It's more than what you can get on the live shows here. And if you happen to find us for the first time this week and you didn't know, we're the Daily AI Show. We're here 5 days a week live, just like we are right now, 10 a.m. Eastern. And we do this 5 days a week. This is episode 410. We've been doing this for a while and our audience is growing. If you want to join us live, come over to YouTube. That's the best place to do it, and join all these wonderful people that are in our live chat right now. They're welcoming, they're friendly, they're warm. They'll welcome you with open arms, and you don't have to know a thing about AI to join the conversation. Just come learn with us and have a good time. So that's all the things going on. Don't forget about that Sci-Fi AI show too, because that's today. The conundrum will go out live on our YouTube channel tomorrow, and then the newsletter will go out. You just have to sign up before then, and then come back next week for all 5 more days of wonderful AI topics with us and the rest of the crew. So with that, I'll say have a great weekend, everybody. Great discussion today, and we will see you again on Monday, but also with the Sci-Fi AI show. Sci-Fi AI show.
Aloha.